Hello everyone, I am Parth Bhandari and today we are going to talk about climate change, its effects and feedback cycles. So all of us have heard people talking about effects of climate change, but the first question we should ask ourselves is what is climate change? It's great to establish a firm base on our definitions. So let us start from bookkeeping. Climate is the long term average of temperature, pressure, and precipitation on Earth. Therefore, climate change is the change in average conditions such as temperature, pressure, and precipitation, which we consider in a particular region over a long period of time. Moving on to effects of climate change, we can understand effects by dividing them into two subcategories. First is direct consequences. Direct consequences include floods due to untimely and heavy rainfall, heat waves, sea level rise, rise in maximum and minimum temperatures, higher ocean temperatures, and groundwater depletion. Second is indirect consequences, which include loss of biodiversity, health effects due to heat strokes and extreme cold, loss of infrastructure due to floods, and loss of crops due to lack of rain or heavy rains. The next question that comes into our mind is quite logical, and it is, why should I be concerned about this? For this I am going to discuss some economic effects that directly affects your pocket. First of all, it is extremely costly to rebuild the roads and houses that are destroyed due to heavy rains. Next, with increasing temperature, the amount of money invested in air conditioning increases, hence our electricity bills also increase. The health effects can be extreme if we just think about heat strokes. With decreasing groundwater levels, the infrastructure we will build to treat water and supply it for domestic and industrial purposes will also increase. Climate change will affect biodiversity as well. Increase of toxic gases in oceans and seas will kill our aquatic life. After absorbing these economic effects, we start pondering, and next question that comes to our mind is, from where did this problem start? There are two major reasons. One is natural reason and the other are man-made reasons. Coming to natural reasons, these are volcanic eruptions, ocean currents, and solar variability. Whereas man-made effects are deforestation, burning of coal, emissions from automobiles, emission from industry, burning of crops, improper decomposition of plastic, and many more. Well, it always comes to our mind that what is the immediate effect of such a change. So I'm going to talk about it. How bad is it for our state? Well, we know that agriculture is one of the most major occupancy in Haryana, and with untimely heavy rains, the crops are being affected. The groundwater level is depleting, due to which farmers have to invest more in order to irrigate their fields. Moreover, with growing industry and population, the demand for fresh water is increasing, and hence the availability of water for farming purposes is facing a decline. Second point is floods. Haryana does not have a proper drainage system, and conditions of road is getting adverse day by day. With undue rains and flood conditions repeatedly every monsoon, it becomes very difficult to travel, and a lot of people are stuck in their house even in medical emergencies. Since there is a large portion of population who are living under poor shelters, we often have to rebuild their house after these floods. Coming to third point, the change in average temperature will also affect Basai wetlands. So, it is very important and becomes necessary for all of us to take steps. After learning why climate change is important and how it is going to affect us, another question that arises is, will there be no natural response against all this? Is nature just going to sit and watch? This brings us to the next topic, that is feedback cycles. A feedback cycle is some cyclic structure of cause and effect that causes some initial change in the system to run through a series of secondary effects, eventually influencing the initial change in some way. There are two types of feedback cycles: positive feedback cycles and negative feedback cycles. Here I'll give you some examples in context of climate change for both positive feedback cycles and negative feedback cycles. For positive feedback cycles, examples are vanishing Arctic ice, warming wetland peat, melting permafrost, Amazon rainforest die-off, clogging the ocean sink, and subsea floor methane hydrate. Whereas for negative feedback cycle, what happens is that once in a few million years, due to rising temperature and absorbed carbon dioxide, silicate weathering produces a high discharge of ions such as calcium 2 positive and magnesium 2 positive in the rivers, and then in the ocean this is followed by formation of carbonate dolomite rocks. The chemical formula for these two minerals is CaCO3 and CaMgCO3 whole twice. This is what removes CO2. After looking at these examples, let's discuss them in detail. Starting with positive feedback cycle, we can understand it in a general sense by supposing that suppose you top your class and every time you do so, school grants you some sort of scholarship. So, now we'll move to formal definition and see how this picture fits in. Suppose we have an action A which promotes action B, and action B will again promote action A, and the cycle goes on. So when you top your class, that is action A, school gives you a scholarship, that is action B. After getting the scholarship, you will be motivated to top your class again. So this is how action A will promote action B and action B will promote action A back, and the cycle goes on. This is what happens in nature most of the times, and we'll discuss one of the example in detail. Now moving towards negative feedback cycles, we have an action A which promotes action B, but B does not promote action A back, it rather suppresses it. Now, a decreased amount of action A will result in a decreased amount of action B, and in this way negative feedback cycle helps in maintaining balance. This can be understood from the previous example, in which increase in carbon dioxide will be action A while silicate weathering will be action B. So now I'll move towards one of the main examples in positive feedback cycle, that is warming wetland peat. Now the first question that comes to our mind is, what is a wetland peat? It can be understood as a region that is flooded by water, and they have a specific types of plants that grow where oxygen processes prevail. Wetlands play a major role in carbon absorption, which leads to decrease in atmospheric CO2. So actually, due to waterlogging, the decay of plants slows down and the dead plants starts forming peat. Peat is a sort of brown deposit that is there because of partial decomposition of these plants. Well, now moving on to some facts regarding wetland peat. As per International Union for Conservation of Nature, 3% of the total surface is covered by wetlands. Damaged peatlands contribute about 10% of greenhouse gas emissions. Remaining area of natural peatland, that is greater than 3 million km square, contains more than 550 gigatons of carbon, representing 42% of all soil carbon, and exceeds the carbon stored in all other vegetation types, including the world's forests. This area sequesters around 0.37 gigatons of carbon dioxide a year. So continuing on that, let's move towards a scientific point of view. Well, according to scientific point of view, due to increase in carbon dioxide concentration, temperature rises. As the temperature rises, the microbes in wetland become active and start decomposing dead plants. As a result of this decomposition, methane is released, which is another greenhouse gas, and temperature rises again. Now, after understanding all this, I hope we all agree that climate change is indeed happening and it has severe consequences. Also, we are supposed to deal with it by ourselves. Nature is not going to help us in it. So, what can we do now? Well, we all have heard that pollution levels decreased during COVID. So let's see what actually happened so that we can learn and understand what to do next. There was substantial decrease in emission from automobiles during lockdown. We cannot stop moving out, but we can stick to public transport and try to use cycle or walk in case of shorter distances, or use e-rickshaws rather than those running on diesel. Industries were shut down initially that led to low emissions. We cannot shut them down, but we can definitely ensure that proper chimneys are installed so that the gases before coming out in the atmosphere are filtered. Furthermore, the waste that directly goes into the river, that too untreated, should be taken care of. Work from home is possible in many sectors, and this is cost efficient not just for the companies but for the environment as well. We should really look into afforestation as it will help replenishing groundwater, which will solve the irrigation problem of our farmers. Thanks for watching the video, and it's our responsibility to make this world a better place to live in. Thank you.